Hi first graders, we're back with another mini lesson about story elements this week. So what are story elements? Remember, they're parts of a story that help you identify the main idea, and they also help you retell a story in order from beginning to end. So what's our standard this week? Our standard is that we can consistently describe the characters, setting, and major events in a story using key details. So we need to make sure that we have all the parts of a story in order to be able to retell it from beginning to end. So the first part is characters. Remember, these can be people, they can be animals, or they can be things. So here are some of our favorite characters in stories that we've read as first graders. We have David and the boy from the Black Lagoon books, who are people. We've got the pigeon and pug, who are animals. And we have the fire truck from I'm Brave. Next, we know about setting, where and when a story takes place. So here we can see some of our favorite characters again and their settings. The pigeon has a bus in his mind. That's where that story takes place. Our friend from Black Lagoon is at school. And we have Peter from A Snowy Day, who is outside in the snow here. Now let's take a look at problem. Problem is also called a major event in a story. This is something that happens in the story that the character must deal with. It's usually something that needs to be fixed or solved. So here, Peter has a problem when he brings snow in from outside and it melts. He has to figure out why it melted. And here we have our friend Pig the Pug, who of course likes to always blame Trevor for all the things that go wrong in his life. The next part of story elements is the solution, another major event. This is how the problem gets fixed or solved by the character. So even though Peter's snowball melted because he brought it inside and it got hot, he wakes up the next day and sees that there's more snow that has fallen, and so he's able to go outside and get a new snowball again. And then of course we know that poor Trevor, he usually makes it out okay at the end of the Pig the Pug books because he makes good choices and he's still a good friend to Pug. So story elements are key details. So remember, each part of the story helps the reader understand the plot. This means that I can tell a story in order using those key details. So story elements make retelling easier. So let's look at the day the crayons quit. We know that the crayons are upset with Duncan. They write letters. Duncan reads those letters and he makes changes so that the crayons will be happy. So I've told the story from beginning, middle, and end in order, and I've talked about Duncan, I've talked about some of the things that happened, and then I've talked about how the problem gets resolved with a solution. Let's put all of these things into practice by reading a story. So this story is called The Garden, and I noticed down here it's going to ask me some questions about how the characters might feel, things that he's planted. Another question about what does he do in the spring, how does the story end, and how do his feelings change. All right, so those are some of the things that I want to keep in mind while I'm reading. A lot of these I'm noticing are key details. Remember, those story elements are really going to help me understand and answer questions about key details. Marty and his dad spent a sunny spring day planting seeds in their new garden. They planted radishes, carrots, lettuce, and peas. Marty was so excited to see his plants grow and eat the fresh and delicious food from his own garden. Each day he checked on his garden. Nothing was growing. He started to feel very sad. "It will happen soon," his dad kept saying. Days went by, and still Marty did not see any plants. "I must not be very good at planting," thought Marty. Then one day he looked out the window and saw something green in his garden. He walked out and saw tiny green sprouts poking up all over his garden. He ran to get his dad. They did a happy dance together. Their garden was growing. All right, so I'm going to take a minute just to kind of think and see if I can think of some key details already in my mind. So I'm learning about Marty and his dad as characters. The setting's probably going to be the garden because that seems to be what the author talks mostly about, and they're planting things and waiting for them to grow. I want to read the passage again one more time though to make sure I'm ready to answer these questions. Marty and his dad spent a nice spring sunny day planting seeds in the new garden. They planted radishes, carrots, lettuce, and peas. Marty was so excited to see his plants grow and eat the fresh and delicious food from his own garden. Each day he checked on his garden. Nothing was growing. He started to feel very sad. "It will happen soon," his dad kept saying. Days went by, and Marty still did not see any plants. "I must not be very good at planting," thought Marty. Then one day he looked out the window and saw something green in his garden. He walked out and saw tiny green sprouts poking up all over his garden. He ran to get his dad. They did a happy dance together. Their garden was growing. All right, now I feel I'm ready to take a look at these questions. The first question says, why was Marty feeling sad? He did not like planting seeds. His garden was not growing. He wanted to play a game. Well, I can go ahead and eliminate C because I know this story is nothing about a game. So my two choices are A and B. He did not like planting seeds. His garden was not growing. I'll give you a moment to think or write your answer down. Which of these do you think is why Marty is feeling sad? I'm going to go back up here to the text where it says he started to feel very sad. And I'm going to look at the sentence before it and see what it says. Nothing was growing. That matches this answer, B, of his garden was not growing. So why is he sad? Our answer is B, his garden is not growing. My next question says, tell two things Marty and his dad planted. All right, well for this I definitely need to go back to the text and see what I can find as examples. They planted radishes, carrots, lettuce, and peas. So I'll give you a moment to think and write down two things on your paper about what he and his dad planted. So if I were writing an answer, I would write down radishes and carrots, but you could also write lettuce and peas. What did Marty and his dad do in the spring? Let's see. Marty planted a garden, or they played in the garden, or went to the mountains. So again, what did Marty and his dad do in the spring? A, planted a garden, B, played in the yard, or C, went to the mountains. Think of an answer and write it down. Now, if I were thinking, I would say, I know this story doesn't say anything about mountains, so that's not an answer choice I'm going to choose. I don't remember reading anything about them playing either, so I think my best choice is going to be A, planted a garden, because this whole thing is about Marty and his dad planting seeds in the garden. All right, let's go over here to how does the story end? So I'm going to think about the story's ending. The seeds were not growing. The garden was growing. Marty and his dad planted seeds. So I'm going to look back again at the end of the story, these last few lines, and I'm going to see how does this story end. So you go ahead and write down what you think is the answer. A, the seeds were not growing. B, the garden was growing. C, Marty and his dad planted seeds. All right, so I came up with the answer of the garden was growing, because when I look back, he looks out the window and he sees that something green is in his garden. They did a happy dance together, so that must mean that his garden is growing now. Last question. How did Marty's feelings change in the story? So if I think back to the story, Marty's planting seeds, then he starts to feel sad, then he starts to feel happy when his seeds start to grow. So I'm going to put that all into a sentence to explain how he feels at the end of the story, or how his feelings change. So Marty's feelings change because he's sad when his plants don't grow, but then he becomes happy when they do start to grow. All right, so let's summarize what we've learned for today. We know that good readers have to use story elements to help them understand a story, and that includes characters, setting, problem, and solution. And this is going to help us next week when we learn more about retelling and central message. And one final thought. Here's our friend Pig the Pug. He says it's all about me. We'll see next week when we start to do some retelling and central message if the stories are really all about him. All right, show us what you know, first graders, on the next few slides, and we'll be back next week with another lesson.